Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this early hour. We appreciate the interest that's being taken in our community forums and want to invite you to ask any questions that you would like. We are here to answer those questions. We have trustees. Mr. Jackman is here with me. We have trustees on the line, I believe, as well. We have staff members here, Superintendent McGovern, Nicole Bolton as the Director of Human Resources. And so we have plenty of people here that can answer your questions. So nothing is off the table. We will answer to the best of our ability. When it comes to the funding, some of the questions we may not be able to answer because it is such in such a strategic place, I guess, right now with the legislature meeting. But the first thing that I want to do is turn it over to Mr. Duncan, Scott Duncan, our Chief Financial Officer, and he's going to give you a little bit of an update on the budget. Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So broad perspective on the budget for the next 3 years, we're looking at a deficit for next year of about $3 million. The year after that, about 7.8, and then in school year 2023 through 2024, a deficit of about 12.8. And this is mainly due to a decrease in ADM, which are average daily membership, and also a little bit for the health insurance. There are a couple of soft numbers in the estimate. The first one is the cap on special education. It has been capped at about $13 million for a couple of years now, and there is a secondary funding source for that. But even so, after all the dust settled for last year, we were still in the hole about $625,000. Another soft number is the tax shortfall grant. And this could be big, but this originates when the actual property tax collections are less than the estimated amount based on the assessed valuation. And this actually would go to increase the budget, but the thing to remember about that is it's one-time money. Now, there are a couple of bills going through the legislature now. One of them, House Bill 61, that would result in a cut to the district of about 5.8. And this is basically our share of the $100 million cut that they're asking for in that bill. There's another bill out there, House Bill 89, and this one is a reduction in salaries, professional development days, instructional facilitator positions, and this would result in a cut of about 2.6 million. And so this would be in addition to the 3 million that we're expecting to be in the hole for next year. So for House Bill, we're talking about $8.8 million, and for House Bill 89, about 5.6. And to put that into broad perspective, a 10% reduction in our foundation guarantee is about 8.14 million. And so House Bill 61, that's a little bit more than that, 10%. 20% reduction would be 16.28, and a 30% reduction would be about 24.42 million. So that's a broad perspective on the budget as we know it today.
Do we have questions?
Yes, we do already have a question.
Okay.
Jacob Summers asked, how close did the early retirements get us to the expected cuts, either the most conservative cuts or the worst case scenario?
Numbers wise, we were hoping for 35 people to take the retirement incentive. We actually approved 23. So we're a little bit short in that 22, I'm corrected, 22. So we're a little bit short in that department. We do have some other resignations coming in as well, but so that is ongoing at this time. Any positions that have been vacated, I mean, all of these are at the end of the year, so nothing impacts students at this time. But moving forward, every position is being looked at carefully to see if it needs to be filled, and if not, do we have, if it does need to be filled, do we have people in the district that we could move because of their certifications that they could fill those positions? So it's very important to us to be very lean when it comes to filling positions so that we hope to avoid a RIF. So Mrs. Bolton, would you like to add to that?
So between our one-year onlys, meaning that when they were hired, they were told that this is just a job for 1 year, and then if the job is open, then they would reapply for it the next year. But between our one-year onlys and our resignations so far, and our early retirements, we have 47 positions. So not that all of those will be absorbed, but it is 47 positions, and the more positions we have open, that's the more jobs that we're able to save. And that's not including, I think I have 4 or 5 positions that we had open at the beginning of the year that we didn't even fill with a long-term sub. Someone else just picked up the caseload. And so I need to add those in, but I think we're 50-ish right now. So that's not good, but that's more positive than just the 22.
Superintendent McGovern, would you like to add something?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Jellicoe. Good morning, everybody. Jake, your question is an excellent question. And just to build off that too, at the elementary level, it's a little bit easier for us only in the sense that their certifications for elementary, unless they have the early childhood, really go K through 6. But at the secondary level, we have to really pay attention to the content areas for people. So not only when Nicole was talking about the numbers for the early retirement, but it also makes a difference for each one of those areas, which can affect our specials. We value specials. We value all of our core areas, our counselors. So there is a lot that goes into that at that secondary level. There is at the elementary, but that secondary piece really has the certifications that you have to pay close attention to. Just real quick too, I think it might be good for everyone at home, and then also if they view this a little bit later, about the things that the district has done up until this point for all of the cuts. That might be a good thing as we lead into some of the other questions, because people out there think, and I think some of the messaging a little bit has been that education hasn't taken any cuts up until this point. And I think what we've done as a district has really been very strategic in how those cuts have been. We want to keep them away from our students as much as possible for programs that they have, offerings, and then also for our staff. But just very quickly, some of the things that our district has done over several years that I think it's important for our parents and for our community to know is first and foremost, we had 75 paraprofessional positions clear back in 15-16. The budget scenario then, we were 6 million in the hole, and that was 75 paras that did have a RIF, a reduction in force. Very difficult time. And over those years, we've frozen salaries for our staff, for all of our staff as we've worked through some of the budget. We've been able to restore 2 of those previously, but we still have that since 15-16. We've, with the paraprofessionals, but we have a total of 148 positions that we have either RIFed or through attrition. And that's been certified staff, classified staff, and also those at the central office, which were certified staff as well. Scott talked about the special education cap where the district was not fully reimbursed of $625,000 from last year. I think it's important too that our nutrition services program, we were one of the last districts, if not the last district, that was unable to be self-funded, and is actually a requirement for nutrition services programs. And we have not been able to do that. And being able to hold out as long as we did came from a lot of fiscal oversight and really doing our best to keep that program going. But we cannot do that anymore. It can't be self-funded. So we're very thankful that we've had some of the assistance for free breakfast and free lunch, especially through the pandemic. I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have those opportunities. Also, just very quickly, some things that our district has done. When we closed Lincoln, it saved about $400,000, maybe a little bit more than that, but that was the savings when we closed Lincoln. We've done an early retirement before, the first time that we did that, and that was for 25 certified jobs, and that saved about $2 million at that time. We redesigned our employee insurance plan to higher deductibles, and that was about 1.5 million in savings. We had instructional facilitator, instructional coaching positions also that were eliminated, and that saved about 1.17 million. Previously, I know we have new start and end times going in for next year, but the last time that we did that, it was because transportation costs were fixed, and so it put us in a deficit for transportation. And that was about 280,000 when we redid those several years ago. So just quick recap on it, but the district has taken a lot of steps over the years to really keep those budget cuts as much as possible away from our kids and from our staff. And unfortunately, if these cuts go through, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. Programs for kids are going to be on the line. There's bills out there where they want to reduce activities totally for our kids. The effects of these legislative bills, of some of them, it would devastate our district. I really don't know how else to say that, but that's putting it out there. It would devastate.
Thank you, Kelly. Sorry, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions from Sarah. I'll go ahead and read both of them. Good morning. Why does Sweetwater One seem to be in a worse financial situation compared to other districts? What was done differently here that puts us in such a difficult spot? And then she also asks, does everyone feel that the curriculum will be able to be covered completely with only 144 days, larger class sizes, and less minutes in a day in the elementary classroom? I know, Nicole, you wanted to address the first one.
I can address the second one too, and I think other people will jump in on the financial situation. And Sarah, I think that those are good questions. The reality is we're not in a worse financial situation than other districts. We've been very vocal and we have held a lot of meetings and we've been trying to get the information out there, but I know other districts have too. And as we've been testifying, the other superintendents, the other chief financial officers, the other assistant superintendents, HR, they are all testifying, letting the state know what these effects will do to their district. It's just we're one of the larger districts, so we're looking at a total of $9 to $11 million in cuts. So like our neighbor, Green River, we're double their size. And so equivalency wise, we've lost about the same enrollment, but because we're double their size, we've lost double the enrollment. And just losing the enrollment, our funding model automatically adjusts. So that's 3.02 million right off the bat. And then with the additional cuts that are proposed, it will take us up to 9 or 11 million. And I want to just reinforce what Ms. McGovern said. We've been taking cuts for the last 5 years that I've been in this position. The state has asked us to cut. We've told them how it's going to hurt us. We've figured out how to do it. And all of our staff, all of them have been doing more with less. We are to a point now that the cuts will violate the Constitution because we will not be able to offer the basket of goods that we are required to offer. And that's the problem. We also are trying to get the information out because we don't want people getting upset when 1 to 4 schools close, when we no longer can offer activities and athletics without it being pay to play. I mean, I know that I have family in Utah that just for their daughter to try out for the high school volleyball team was a $2,000 fee. If she didn't make it, they didn't get a refund. And when they make it, it was about $3,000 more for the season. So I want to say when we are instituting saying, please, let's look at a tax. I promise you a 1 penny tax is going to be a lot cheaper than what you're going to be paying out of pocket for speech and debate. Any of it. It's everything. It's not just sports. And so truly we are not in a different financial spot than other districts. And before I go to the 4-day week, if anyone else has anything to add to that, Carol?
I just want to say there is a real misconception out there that districts are flush in money. And you've heard Mrs. McGovern talk about the cuts that we've already experienced. That simply is not true. And it's the way the funding model is, it is a block grant, which gives us the flexibility to use the money in the way that Sweetwater 1 feels is necessary. Of the 48 districts in the state of Wyoming, no two are alike. And so that's the value of the funding model being as flexible as it is. And that's something that we want to retain as well. There's talk about making the insurance piece a reimbursable, which means that only what you spend is what you get back. The problem with that is insurance, the actual education budget in the state of Wyoming has not increased that much if you exclude health insurance. And all of you out there know that your insurance has increased. Businesses know that their part of the insurance has increased. That is the problem with the budget, as inflated as it has become, is because of the health insurance. That's not a Wyoming problem. That's a national problem. But it has not been resolved, and that's the problem. Wyoming has the most expensive health care in the country, and it's because of our low population. Companies do not want to come in and serve us because there's the biggest bang for their buck is when they have many people enrolled, and we just don't have the population to do that. So there's a lot of things going on, but legislators in particular want to point to, we've got all this money that we're hiding. There's no way to hide it in the funding model. You're accountable for every penny. The audits are constant, and special ed has audits, transportation has audits. There's just no way to hide money. So that is just pure mythology.
Can I add something from the person? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ms. McGovern.
Anyone else? Mrs. McGovern?
So Carol, just for clarification, what's not true out there is the fact that our district hasn't taken any cuts up to this point.
Oh, that is absolutely false.
Oh, okay. I
No.
thought I
No,
misunderstood you, that
no.
my facts, that what I was saying wasn't true. I was just clarifying.
No,
I don't
no.
want
That
That we're
anybody
not
out there
flush with
thinking.
money, we're
Yeah.
not flush.
Yeah. No, I'm reiterating that the cuts that we have had to do and future cuts, as has been said already, we've been able to keep most of those cuts away from students, with the exception of having to raise class sizes. We've already done that. But if these cuts go through, we may see classes of 30 and 35. And I mean, a kindergartner in a class of 30, that's just unconscionable. So I came from Utah many years ago, 1973 to be exact. And they had, because legislators are saying, well, why does it cost Wyoming so much more to educate their kids than it does our surrounding states? My experience was in Utah. I still have family in Utah. So I'm very familiar with what's going on down there. When I came here in 1973, I had been teaching classes of 35 to 40 to 45 at that time. And it hasn't changed. That's what they do. Utah has a metropolitan area. The Wasatch Front goes from Provo all the way up to Logan. That's their concentration of students. And it's by far easier to educate students when you can put students in classes of 35, 40, 45. We don't want to go there. I mean, it was an absolute joy when I came here and I only had classes of 20. I mean, you can actually teach, you can actually get to know students, you can actually get to know families. It's just makes a world of difference when it comes to student learning. So
Can I add something from the personnel side with
Please.
our budget? Because there are people out there that are going public and saying that, well, they're attacking education, and in particular administrators. And so I just want to talk about salaries for a second. Our funding models are flexible for a reason, so that our individual districts can meet their individual needs. The smaller districts' needs are far more different than ours. But one of the places we compete with most is Utah. Why? Because they've got pro teams. They have Target. That's a big one. They've got Costco. They have a lot of opportunities right within miles of themselves that we don't necessarily have. We drive a couple hours to get there, and that's okay. That's what a lot of us love about Wyoming. So a couple years ago, we took a bold step, and we raised our base salaries to a little over $50,000 starting for teachers. And because when I opened Lincoln 5 years ago, for one position, I literally had 200 to 300 applicants, and I'm not exaggerating, 200 to 300 applicants to choose from. I was able to choose the cream of the crop. You want to know how many applicants we have for a job today? We're lucky if we have 10. And all 10 of those might have the certification, but that doesn't mean they're a quality teacher or good for the classroom. If they've been to 10 districts in the last 10 years and there's a reason they're being let go, I don't want them with our kids. So out of those 10, we might have 4 that we might be able to interview if we can get to them fast enough. But anyways, after we did that base raise, 2 weeks later, a lot of districts in Utah matched our base. So it eliminated a lot of opportunity for us. And Cheyenne gets a lot more applications than Rock Springs does. Well, the same thing goes for our administrators. You know, they were actually some of the lowest paid administrators in the state for one of the largest districts. Utah still pays their administrators more than what we pay our administrators. But I go back to the number one effect that we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck is having a quality teacher in a classroom. Quality is what matters. And if we don't have that, it's the students that suffer. And I'm sure all of you have had a bad experience here or there, and the effects can be damaging forever. But the same goes for a principal. A bad principal will destroy a school. And the same goes for a superintendent. If you have a bad superintendent, it will take years to recover from the damaging effects. So if we don't have competitive salaries, we are not going to get quality people into these positions, which ultimately affects the kids. I don't want to put warm bodies in a classroom. And I can tell you over the last 2 years, we've had multiple positions we have not been able to fill. And luckily, we've had some really good long-term subs, but it's still not the same as having somebody that is a high-quality teacher. I just want to address the 4-day week real quick. Yeah, Sarah, I have no doubt that we'll be able to offer the exact same quality in the 144 days. No doubt. There's zero research out there that shows that a 4-day week gets better or worse results than a 5-day week. It all comes down to the implementation and the quality of instruction. You can find some research that shows when they go to a 4-day week, it kind of dropped, but if you read through the article, every one of them shows that it goes back up. And you can find some that it increased, but if they don't keep up whatever they changed, it goes back down, but it all stays about the same. It's not about getting through a book. It's about hitting our standards and teaching those standards deeper. And I have no doubt and I have full confidence that our teachers will be able to do that for our kids. And then Katie, for the kiddos that can't afford fees, if it's a pay to play, yeah, we'll be required to pay for it, and we should, because no kid should be denied an opportunity for sports activities. But again, that'll just be one more unfunded mandate that we'll have to cut somewhere else in order to fund that. And we would want to, because that's what's best for kids. We do have a foundation, but they don't have a bottomless pit of money. And I know that they bend over backwards to help our kids in any way that they can. But what I think people need to understand is the funding money we get, we have a lot of things that we have to pay for that we don't get money for. One of them, K-6 counselors. Can you guys believe, anyone out there, can you believe that? K-6 counselors aren't funded, but they're absolutely essential for our schools. Nurses aren't funded. I can't imagine not having nurses in our schools for the feeding tubes and the diabetics and all of the things that you have. Huh? Oh yeah, COVID. I don't want to say that bad word. That's a bad word. our SROs, I mean, there's a lot that is not funded. SPED is not fully SPED is not fully funded anymore. So,
What is SPED, Nicole?
I'm sorry, special education is not fully funded anymore. And that is something by the federal government, which we can let Tiff talk about. I'm not going to get into that. She's the expert for that. We'll let her talk about that. But yeah, we'd be able to do fundraisers, but when you're looking in the millions, it's not going to cover what we need to cover. So it'll be interesting. It'll be an unfunded mandate. And unlike other states, we are a state-funded model. We aren't locally funded like a lot of states are. But Tiff, why don't you talk about the special education funding?
So the one thing about special education is we do function under different or separate rules and regulations from the federal government. And so when our IEP teams put in things into the IEPs, those are based off our students' needs. And we don't have the ability to say that, well, because they need this service, we don't have the funding to do that. Whatever our IEP teams put in there, we go based off of the students' needs. And so if that is a related service such as OT, PT, or speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech, or other kinds of accommodations or supports, we absolutely have to fund that, and we have to find the way to provide that. We don't have the option to say that we can't fund that. I know that Scott talked about the $13 million cap that we have, and that we are frozen at that. I think that was a cap that we based off of the 2017-2018 school year that we spent, and so we have been on that cap for 2 years. Since that time, we have increased ADM, we have increased enrollment, we have students coming in with more social emotional needs, and we have to find ways to fund that. We need to do what is best for our students here in Sweetwater 1, our special education students. And so we have to find ways to fund that. And so with that, we have to have increased staff. We have to, if we come in with some of those students that have those increased social emotional and they need a residential facility, and that is a placement by an IEP team, we have to find ways to fund that. And so a lot of the times we're going over, which I think that Kelly or Scott addressed. Last year we were $625,000 over that, and we have to find the monies to be able to provide those needs for our students.
Thank you, Tiffany. We had another question that's kind of scrolled up through the comments, so I want to make sure we don't forget. Darren asked, is there the possibility of closing schools?
Depending on the size of the cuts, that is a realistic situation that we're facing. I want to clarify what closing a school means. It means that the physical building would be closed, but it also means that those students will have to be moved to other classrooms in other buildings, as well as the staff with them. It does mean probably that the class sizes will be larger because we'll have fewer teachers, which is exactly the opposite of what some of the most recent federal money wants to do. They want to actually increase the number of teachers. But with these cuts, we'll be forced to have fewer teachers with more kids. And so the students, I know there's a lot of concern where we don't know, we really have not made decisions about that because the session is going on at this time. In fact, as we speak, and for the month of March. So we don't know the size of what they're finally going to end up with. I've dealt with the legislature long enough to know that you don't know what it is until the gavel comes down on the last day. And there have been things that have been done at the last minute, much of it detrimental because it's not thought through very well. And so that's what we're facing, is a legislature that's meeting right now that is determined to cut education. We keep hearing they want to diversify the state. Like I said, I've worked with the legislature almost 20 years now, and they keep talking about diversifying the state, diversify the state. Well, diversifying the state and cutting education just seems very counterproductive to me. When companies look at relocating in Wyoming, where do they look? They look at the education systems in the localities where they're looking at relocating. So, education, it's demanded by the Constitution, but it's also the the baseline of growing our economy and doing anything that would help grow our base and our economic situation here in Wyoming. I do, since I've mentioned the legislature, I want to encourage people to get in touch with your legislators. We have we've been told that there are 18 members of the House, Wyoming House, who have signed no new tax pledges, meaning that they won't increase any funding. There was a white paper generated in 2016 for the purpose of the legislature concerning education. And there were a number of items, there were actually 5 items that were listed on that white paper. Among them were cuts of various degrees. Those cuts have all been implemented. What was number 5 on that list was a revenue stream for education. And 2016, it said we needed a revenue stream for education. We still do not have a revenue stream for education. So if, please consider contacting your legislator. It's really easy to do. We have, just Google Wyoming legislature and it'll come up with the official site. It's a WyoLeg site. It's before you now. And as you scroll down through it, you can see where it talks about contacting your legislator. You can put in an address and it will tell you who your senator is and who your House representative is. And then there are email addresses where you can contact them directly. Please consider that. Tell your story. What will those kinds of cuts that they're proposing for education, what kind of effect will those have on your family? And if you're an employee, you're probably also a parent as well. So please feel free to do that. They need to hear from you. We did a forum last week with legislators and we're, to be very blunt, very disappointed in the turnout that we had. We have legislators that basically will not even talk to us. So, maybe hearing from parents and their constituents might make a difference, and that would be very helpful. So, like I said, it's, and I would encourage you to make those emails personal. Tell your story, as I said, and let them know that this is not what you value, that you value education and that you want to see it fully funded.
Chair Jellicoe, I would like you to elaborate on something. As we give information, it's true, we have representatives that have not once reached out to us to ask questions and get accurate information. We held a dinner, 2.5 people showed up, and I say half because one was only able to show up for like the first 20 minutes and then had to leave for duties that they have at the state. But yet they're out there giving, information such as education. Some districts, 50% of their budget goes to administration costs. Well, unless you're a district of 2 people, that is so far from the truth. And it's easy to cherry pick information, but our funding model is so complicated, right? So people have cherry picked information to make us look bad, but I'm still questioning why education is the one being attacked, because education is not the reason the state is going bankrupt. The reason the state is going bankrupt, if they do, they're not going bankrupt yet, but why they're saying they're in this financial crisis is because the states failed to hold up their end of the bargain of bringing in revenue. You can't keep cutting and not bring in some kind of revenue. So people have been talking about consolidation of districts. Chair Jellicoe, people have been talking about consolidation of districts and how that will solve the problem. Well, Green River and Rock Springs have both absorbed their associate superintendent position and put that on with someone else to take over. So
Right.
if we combine, wouldn't that position basically need to be added? And we still have to have admin in the buildings.
The 48 districts, the thought or the plan for some legislators is to consolidate down to 1 district per county, which would mean that Sweetwater 1 and Sweetwater 2 would combine. But again, the kinds of distances we're talking about, you still have to have the teachers in the classrooms. You still have to have an administrator in the building. The savings from consolidation is not nearly what people think it is. When it comes to transportation, you still have to have buses in both districts. You cannot combine the bus force in order to um, bus students to and from school. You've got to have the respective buses. So the savings is not really there that people will say can be saved. Yes, there might be some. But again, if you have an HR person in one district, do you need an assistant in the other district? So the savings just is not there when it comes to consolidation. I have a couple of trustees also that would like to talk. So Mr. Mickelson, would you like to join us?
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to briefly address some of the topics that we've recently discussed, specifically the question about our finances and our being cut. And I can speak to the cuts because they basically started once I was on the board, and they have not stopped. So my entire tenure as a board member has been about eliminating positions and services. It has been, it would have been a lot more fun to have been on the board 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But 8 years ago, we had to start making these adjustments, and it has been incredibly difficult. And I don't think people understand part of what's happened with the sort of struggles that the extraction industry has suffered has been that declining enrollment. Natrona County, right, which I believe is the second largest district in the state, closed 5 schools last year because kids left. And anecdotally, our enrollment has not declined as significantly because people moved from Campbell and Natrona County to Rock Springs to live with family when they lost their jobs. And those kids came with us, or with them. And it is just sort of a harsh reality of the way we've structured our system in Wyoming, that all of us have been receiving benefits grossly disproportionate to what we're contributing because we've relied on the extraction industry to foot the bill. And that is not the case anymore. And so people need to be very aware that if they value these services and they value the experience that their kids receive, they have to tell their legislators, we are willing to pay for this. And then the only other thing I had to add regarding the shift to the 4-day week, in the research around extended school days or extended school years, in order to achieve the same magnitude of growth difference that you get when you have a highly qualified, effective teacher who has time to plan and do their job well, right, which is our goal, our school year would need to be extended by 75 days from what it is currently to 250 days to see that same level of benefit. That highly qualified, competent, capable, caring instructor, teacher in the classroom, is what gives us the growth in kids. And the other aspect of that research shows that the kids who benefit the most from more school are the kids who are already ahead. The kids who benefit the least are the kids who are behind because of all the different pressures that result in them being behind. When you extend school or have more school, they end up falling further behind than their peers who are ahead. And so while there isn't a lot of research indicating 4-day versus 5-day, there is some very strong research showing that longer school days and longer school years have very disproportionate benefits to cohorts, depending on where they're at, that harm the kids who are further behind and especially tend to harm boys, right? Because boys already have some academic issues. And it's certainly not something that any district would want to see happen. But our district's focus on, and I still have people to this day from when we had to riff the paras who very strongly dislike me and express that routinely. But our focus as a board and a district has been on recruiting, retaining, and supporting those highly effective teachers, because over and over and over again, the research shows that's who makes the difference. There is no teacher, no matter how capable they are, that can effectively educate 30, 35, 40 kids in a classroom. It just can't be done. And so we really need people to understand what the impact of these cuts would be on our kids, their outcomes, what things will look like. It will wreck education. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Max. Mrs. Summers, I understand you'd like to visit with us too.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to everybody that's listening. I want to address a couple things. One is there are bills out there that would force consolidation of schools, or force consolidation into larger districts. And this is pretty harmful to small schools, and we've been there before. So small schools are often the very heart of their community. There's one school in little towns. They are the heart of their community. They are the places where people meet to celebrate and to encourage their students and their youth. They are places where fundraisers are held for community members who have fallen on hard times or illness. They are places where, in Farson, for example, that's our county library. We don't have another library in Farson. So our school operates as our county library. It operates as, a blood drive center when they hold blood drives. It is, in a sense, a bit of a community center where we hold, a number of benefits to the community. We also have really strong community connections. Up here in Farson, we're developing a community partnership with the conservation district to grow trees, and they're developing, our students developing these partnerships that are really important. They benefit the community far beyond just educating our students. And if we were to lose our school, we would be losing essentially the heart and soul of our community. And this is, part and parcel to all of these small communities across the state of Wyoming. And one of the things that we found in the late 1960s, early 1970s, Wyoming forced consolidations of districts. And really unfortunate consequence of that was that small towns lost their voice. They lost local control, so they didn't have control over their schools anymore. They lost their autonomy, and many of those small communities had to close their schools, and they began busing their students to larger population centers. It's expensive to run small schools. We are very fortunate in this district that there's a commitment to maintaining Wong Center and Farson, but how deep do the budget cuts get before we have to make the financial decision to close our small schools? And that's a really scary thought. It is more expensive to run a small school. You still need custodial staff. You still need to maintain the building. You still need the English teacher, whether the English teacher is teaching 5 students or the English teacher is teaching 35 students. All of those services have to be maintained, and it is more expensive to run a small school than it is to run a large school when we're talking on a per student basis. So it's really scary that we could see the loss of schools in these communities across the state of Wyoming. The other point I'd like to talk about is what that will do to communities, what these bills will do to communities across the state, and what it will do to our economy. In 2012, 2013, Kansas ran this big experiment where they cut their taxes. They they just completely cut their taxes way down, and we had huge deficits. So they made cuts to education, they made cuts to police, they made cuts to other vital services. And when they did that, they destroyed the economy of Texas, Kansas. The growth of their economy was sluggish compared to surrounding states and to the nation on the whole. Businesses left Kansas, people left Kansas, and businesses don't come to places where there's not a good education system. Businesses, one of the first things people look at is how are the schools? And if the schools are good, they're not going to get employees to come there, so they don't set up shop and they don't operate a business. If we need to diversify our state, we need to diversify our economy. Cutting education is not the way to do it. This will cause harm to our economy of our state for decades to come. And Kansas, they repealed those tax cuts in 2017 because it decimated their economy, and they had to go back to funding education fully in order to bring the economy of their state back. I don't think that's what we want to do to Wyoming, and I don't think it's what we want to do to our communities. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Mr. Jackman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we've talked for about 45 minutes about all the challenges we're facing, but we want to enlist your help because we've been talking to the legislatures since we're blue in the face about all the things that these cuts are going to do, but they want to hear your stories. They want to hear about your second grader who loves art. I mean, if these budget cuts 10, 20% go through, I don't know if we can afford art and math at the same time. Tell them how important art is to your second grader. Tell them how important soccer is to your junior in high school and how he might not graduate without it. Tell them choir. Tell them anything that you can, any story. Talk about your senior that is job shadowing, now has a new passion for being an auto mechanic or a new job. That's what keeps these kids in school and helps them grow. The legislators want to hear those stories. They don't want to hear from us anymore about how terrible these cuts are. They want to hear from you. So help us, because we can't do it without you, and we're all in this community together.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have some questions?
Yes, we do have quite a few, actually. Pam is asking about the 4-day week and the research that shows that it won't affect education.
I'm going to just keep the 4-day week really brief because it's not so much about the budget cuts. We're going to the 4-day week, and we have done a plethora of research. We had 3 different committees that have done this, and we did the research 2 years ago. The research is inconclusive, period. It doesn't show that it helps or hurts. It basically goes stagnant. You can find an article that it says it dips, but it went back down. You can find plenty of articles where it goes. It comes down to what Max spoke very well about, a quality teacher in the classroom. Quality is what makes the difference. You can have a district on a 4-day week, and you can have a district that goes 360 days a year, and that 4-day week will outperform that district that goes 360 days a year by leaps and bounds by having a quality teacher in that classroom. That is what makes the difference. Having a quality principal in a school, that makes the difference. Having quality leaders, that makes the difference. Quality is what makes the difference. That's what the research shows. I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't want to talk about the 4-day week anymore unless it has to do with cost savings.
Thank you, Nicole. Nate says, with COVID, I know things were complicated, but when will parents be able to participate in the classrooms again? With larger class sizes, what does it look like relying on parents with larger class sizes?
Would you like me
Yeah.
to take that one?
Superintendent McGovern?
Sure. Nate, thank you for your question. I think that's a great one. COVID has been, without a doubt, one of our greatest challenges for all of us in our careers and perhaps in our lifetime. That one truly is a difficult balance on there to manage, keeping our schools open and then honoring a sense of normalcy of what we've been through for this one. But I think what's important to say here is that our district really has been a success story for the pandemic. There's been a large amount of research and planning that went into reopening of our schools from the very first day. And we hope to keep our schools open all the way till the very end in May. So we take a look at it frequently. So please know what you're asking does not fall on any deaf ears whatsoever. It's really an interesting dilemma to balance. We know the vaccines are coming through. We've got a little over 50%, I believe, of our staff that has participated in those clinics. We also know that the vaccines are coming through in our community as they're available with public health, and we're working through those. So we watch that, we keep an eye on it, and we hope to open things back up to the way that they used to be. I can't give you a solid date for that because we truly don't know. We pay attention to the health orders and we follow those to the T, and make sure that our kids are safe and our staff. But that firm date, I apologize to you, we're not going to be able to give you that one. I know parents are interested in that, and so is our staff and our kids. But we just got to work through that and keep people as safe as possible and keep our schools running. That helps our economy too.
Thank you, Kelly. Our next question is from Michelle. Why build the new satellite high school if enrollments are down? Couldn't they be put at the high school with the drop of enrollments?
This question has come up, and I thank you for the question because I think it's important to clarify it. The satellite high school is the result of a capacity issue. And we have capacity issues at the high school and we have capacity issues at the elementary schools. The problem is they are different capacities. At the high school, we are over capacity. And so the satellite high school will give us the ability to, as Mr. Celeroli said the other day, opportunity for students to experience a very, very updated, a very technical building that has a lot of advantages to CTE training and those kinds of things. So, it's important that we be able to use the satellite high school because we are over capacity at the high school. That will also allow, by moving some students to the satellite high school, will allow some renovations to occur at the current high school in order to keep it functioning at a high level for a longer period of time. The other end of the capacity issues is that we have elementary schools that are not at capacity. As a matter of fact, they have a number of empty classrooms. And so the reason that elementary buildings may have to be closed is because those students could be, the students in a building that is closed could be moved to another building, and it would be more efficient to run a larger elementary school with classrooms full rather than two elementary buildings with some classrooms in both buildings empty. So those are the difference in the capacity issues that we're facing. The high school is necessary. The elementary school, we have space in those elementary buildings that could be utilized by students in other buildings if the cuts are severe enough that we have to do that.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Celeroli?
I know I'm way back here, hard to see.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Also, one of the other things I want to add on to what you explained is the budget for the satellite school was appropriated 2 years ago by legislators. Once it's appropriated and earmarked for a specific state project, you can't use those funds for anything else. It has to go to that school. Okay, now, with that being said, there were some issues, some questions were being raised. Well, why build a school? And if you'd have to build it, why not leave it, vacant for a year or two? When you look at the capacities that we have coming up in the junior high and what we currently have at the high school, those numbers really haven't changed. The school will be hovering around 1,400 to over 1,400 for the next 4 to 6 years. Okay, so the satellite school will alleviate that issue, as Chair Jellicoe said. The other thing too is if you leave a building closed, this is kind of like buying a new car and waiting out until the warranty is over with and then getting in it and driving it. Okay, it takes 2 to 3 years for a building to work out all of its kinks. You have a 1-year warranty on the majority of issues, and that has to be taken care of within that first year. Manufacturers don't care what our conditions are to leave a building closed because of capacity, whatever. Those warranty issues have to be addressed within that first year. So the only way that you could really address is to utilize the building. And then the other things that go along with it, as Chair Jericho, said, pointed out, this school, we'll do virtual walkthroughs of the school as it gets closer to being finished before it's opened. It is phenomenal. I mean, you look at the school, you have a beautiful place for the kids to sit down at their desk. You'll have science, desks in a beautiful room. We're giving CTE teachers the best building for what we believe to be the best instructors. These kids are going to come out of this school head and shoulders above a lot of other schools in the state, and I would say the country. And I cannot imagine denying these kids the opportunity to have access to that building for the next, as soon as it's open. So with that, there's other issues that I face in my department that I'd like to point out as well. The district has about 1,105, let's say 1,500,000 square feet. Of that 1,500,000 square feet, if you take out teacherages and buildings that are storage, it leaves us 1,157,000 square feet of educational space. Now, this is space that the state has told us that we have to build. Whenever we build a new school, we don't get to pick how many square feet. The state determines based on rubric studies. Now, of that, now they're saying because we have a decrease in enrollment, and again, as Chair Jellicoe pointed out, from in the elementary side, our ADM is down, which means my finances for those buildings are down. So of the 1,157,000 square feet, we get funded for 998,000 square feet. That's a difference of almost 160,000 square feet. That would be like taking money and not maintaining the junior high or two schools the size of Stagecoach. So for instance, not maintaining Stagecoach in Farson School or Stagecoach in Pilot Butte or Eastside. I mean, these cuts are significant, and it's all based on, as Nicole had pointed out earlier, our formulas are self-adjusted. As we have fewer people in enrollment, we get less money. To put cuts on top of that is just, it's just unbelievable. I mean, why have a formula if you're going to come up and change the rules in the middle of the game? So these are the challenges that we're faced with as far as maintaining the facilities, and hopefully that answers the questions on the satellite school.
Thank you, Dan. I understand Mrs. Summers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but our ADM or decline in enrollment is greater in our early elementary grades than it is in our secondary grades, correct?
That is accurate.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Mickelson?
Thank you. So, school boards in general tend to be fairly conservative, not politically, but in the sense of being cautious. And our political climate has shifted faster than school boards have responded with their messaging. And unfortunately, that has allowed that false narrative that schools are, rolling in money, and that everybody who works in education is, going in a Mercedes to their private Dacia, right? The reality is that districts, and I can't speak for all of them, but I can speak for ours, have functioned like that responsible older sibling who gets their tax refund and saves it for future expenses. And the legislature, through its choices, has acted like maybe that younger sibling who's a little wilder and they got their tax refund and went to Cabo. And now we're in a place where the legislature, that younger sibling, can't pay their bills and is blaming the older sibling for being responsible with their money. And we have not had that conversation or sent that messaging out because we want to work with them. We know the state of our economy and revenue, and we know that all of us, no matter what our position is, want the same thing, right? We want our kids to be successful, to be competitive, and to be able to go out in the world or hopefully stay here in Wyoming and contribute to our society. So we've worked very hard not to push back and say, hey, you guys are the ones who fought to make sure that every school that gets built gets its own separate architectural plan so that every community can, you know, have their fancy school and you can go back and say, look what I gave you, instead of doing things in a more cost efficient way. And I think it is time, and certainly people need to understand, school districts are very protective of their employees and their students, and have worked very hard to operate under increasingly lean budgets to make those services a reality for students. We don't get fancy accolades or praise for building new schools, right? Every new school that we've opened, I have heard negative feedback about. Legislators get positive feedback for accomplishing those things for their districts. And so we have sort of competing reward systems. And I really hope people hear districts are that responsible sibling who's saving for future catastrophes. And the legislature, when things are flush and booming, instead of investing in the future, they bought that new 55-inch curved plasma TV, right? It is, I think, a critical point for people to understand that we are having to adjust based on decisions that we were not in control of. And we need you to reach out again and say, hey, y'all made your choices and we're gonna have to clean up that mess, and we're willing to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Max.
Chair Jellicoe,
Superintendent McGovern?
just real quick, one point of clarification on the satellite high school. The staffing for that school will actually come from our current Rock Springs High School. So in essence, we will peel off some of the staff up at the high school with the overcrowding and then move them over to the satellite. So the hiring of new teachers and such would be very minimal, if any at all, for that building. It would essentially spread out what we have to allow some room to move over at the high school. And even by doing so, the high school on James Drive will still be crowded, even when that opens.
Thank you.
We do have a few more questions. Devin asks, why are we busing students to Farson from Rock Springs? And then second part, if you want your student to go to Farson, you get them there, just as if I wanted my child to attend a school out of my school zone in Rock Springs, I would be transporting, not the school.
That was a practice that was put in place way back in the day. And, you know, everything is, I'm not saying this route's going to stay or go, but everything is always up for review when it comes to cuts. So that's why. It's because it's always been done that way. I know that's not a very satisfactory answer, but that's.
Well, and I would add to that, obviously, as Andrea has expressed, the Farson classes are smaller. And there are some students that do thrive in smaller situations. And so that's been the consideration that in allowing students from Rock Springs to go to school in Farson, that some students, those circumstances meet their needs better than a larger classroom at the high school. So that's part of it too, is still striving to meet student needs in transporting those kids to Farson.
And I agree. I just, our policy says one thing, and that same thing could be true for in-town schools too. And so I don't disagree with that. And Farson is a wonderful school, absolutely wonderful. And I can see why people want to go out there. I don't mean to, go off topic with that. It's just that I see what her point is. Our policy says one thing and we require that in town, and that same reasoning that is good for Farson is the same in town too. So let me go there. Can I just add real quick? This should not be a fight between the state and educators, right? We should be working together to come up with solutions in order to fund education. But not only that, Education is not happy that cities are losing funding. They're not happy that the Wyoming Department of Health is losing funding. But to say that because or education has to be funded, we're sucking funding from everybody else is simply not true. So please contact your legislators and your senators and talk to them about what you're willing to do for revenue. If education and providing immunizations to our young children and supporting our Department of Family Services and Wyoming Department of Health is important, then we need to consider what we're willing to do as the citizens of Wyoming in order to fund that, because cutting is no longer a solution. And we have to bring in revenue. It's not an option. And so it's not about fighting, and we shouldn't be, attacking education or attacking this or attacking that. We need to come together to work on solutions.
And I would add, Wyoming has the lowest tax base in the country. Basically, the mineral industry has supported citizens of Wyoming for many, many, many years. And now that the mineral industry is down, we have not we've talked about it, but we've not done anything practical in order to replace those funds. An example, over the last 2 legislative sessions, there's been talk about implementing a lodging tax. Now, lodging, tourism is the number 2 industry in the state of Wyoming. We like to show off our state, and a lot of people like to come here and see it. We do not have a state lodging tax, 0. And that's a tax that's paid primarily by visitors to our state. So we just have not addressed some low-hanging fruit. Last year's session had what they called the big box bill, and that was taxes that were gathered in Wyoming by big box stores, Walmart specifically, I believe it was. And the bill was to keep those taxes here in Wyoming. It didn't pass. So those taxes now go to Arkansas to fund Arkansas children's education instead of our education. Those are just issues that when the state is in as desperate need of funding as it is, to allow those things to happen.
I just want to speak up really quick because I've heard a legislator state that, it's time education do their part and cut. We've been cutting Department of Health. We've been cutting, Nicole mentioned the, funds to assist our elderly and our youth. And that makes me scared. I love Wyoming. I never want to go anywhere else, but it makes me really scared for the future of our state. If we're justifying cutting education because, well, we've already cut health, when are we going to stop cutting and actually taking care of our citizens in Wyoming? It scares me.
Well, we elect officials, right, to represent the citizens of Wyoming. And I understand that some citizens are against taxes, but I feel it is a true injustice to the oath that they take to sign with these organizations saying that they'll never, ever raise taxes. They won't even look at them, because that is not what's best for the people right now. And just like Chair Jellicoe said, there's taxes that wouldn't even touch our people, but yet it was still turned down because I'm not going to vote for any new taxes. And now we're funding another state's education. You tell me how we are electing representatives to make decisions like that for Wyoming. You need to be informed. There are a lot of them that are amazing, and they will listen and they make decisions we don't agree with, and that's okay. We all have to do that. They have tough decisions, but be informed about what we're doing, because when we're sending our taxes to another state to fund their education and we didn't vote for that to stay here, that's a problem.
That's stupid. Sorry.
I was trying to be a little more politically correct, but
Politically correct kicks in for me at about 8:30.
Mr. Klingenpeel. Joe, go ahead.
We've, several people, the theme is contact your legislators, your representatives, your senators, and that's important to do. Our system wasn't set up for legislators to make the decisions. It was set up for our citizens to make the decisions. The preamble of the Constitution doesn't start out, we, the elected officials. It starts out as we, the people. But they cannot make those decisions. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They can't make the decisions that you want them to make as a citizen if you do not contact them. And that goes for our Board of Trustees, They want you to contact them because they want to know what the citizens are thinking in our district. But we don't just live in a district here. We live in a county, we live in a state, we live in the United States. You need to contact the Board of Trustees, you need to contact your legislators and your senators, the state. You need to contact the governor. They need to be listening to you, and they need to make the decisions. They don't make the decisions. But they have to have your input in order to make the decisions that the citizens of Wyoming want to make. That is why it is so, and it's easy to, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, you got to get on a horse and go talk to them. Now you can email them. It's quick, it's simple, and you get your point across, and you get your feelings so they know what's going on. And like we've said several times, and Carol said it several, Chairman Jelko has said it several times, give them your personal story. Okay? They don't want blitz emails. They don't look at them. I've heard it straight from their mouths because they all say the same thing. They want a personal story. So make sure that you are letting your representatives know how you want them to vote, because that's how it's supposed to work. That's how the system is set up. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to bring up, sorry I'm joining you guys a little late. I had to get my kids to school. And as soon as I dropped them off, I was ready to join. I don't know if you guys touched base with this already, but I am extremely concerned with government legislative overreach on activities funding. I do not feel that that's something they should even be considering. I feel if districts need to cut activity funding, that should be a district decision and not a legislative decision. To me, that just really upsets me. If we need to go that deep in budget cuts, I feel it should be a local decision. I don't think the state legislature should be telling every single school district in the state whether they can or cannot fund activities, because we all know how vital those activities are to our kids. And when I say activities, I mean drama, I mean speech and debate, FFA, National Honor Society, along with all the sports people love, football, basketball. And I feel really strongly about that. I know there are some districts who testified that have already cut art and PE, and it just blows my mind, but they have already taken those steps. So to have to keep cutting that much, I just feel like you need to tell legislators if you want that to continue to be a local decision, because they are taking that decision-making away from us, in my opinion. That should be something that we should address ourselves at the local level. And maybe it's just me on this, but that's what I feel. The bills that are coming through, I almost feel like are an attack on education. Where are our priorities? What are we doing? Over and over again, I've been told by community members that they came back to Wyoming for education because we have such great schools. And we're gonna cut the one thing that we have going for us. I'm sorry I'm speaking so passionately, but we should be passionate. This is about the future of our kids and the future of the state of Wyoming. That's just all I have. I'd encourage people, if you have, obviously I've been contacting legislators as much as I can, but unfortunately I feel like sometimes they're just like, her again. So if you have anything you would love to pass along, I would be happy to do that. Just send me an email. You can contact me at 307-871-2163. My email's on the district. I also have a Facebook page. So reach out, let me know what your thoughts are. I'd be happy to pass them along, but I'd encourage you as a citizen of Wyoming to reach out on your own. It seems to be more impactful if you share your own personal story. Share the story about your struggling kid. Share the story about how your kid only wants to go to school because there's art and PE, and that's what's keeping your child in school. We know those are true, real stories. That's what they need to hear. How will these cuts directly impact you, your student? I think those are what are going to make the changes. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. To piggyback on what Stephanie has said, legislators want to hear from their constituents. As they scroll through, I've known several legislators, and as they scroll through the emails that they get, if they see a constituent's email come up, they will respond to that and not respond to many others. And same thing with group kinds of emails. Make it individual, make it personal. And if you're a constituent of theirs in particular, make that point. I am a constituent, and let them know what your values are and why you have those values and how these potential cuts affect your family. Those are the stories that are impactful.
Thank you, Chair Jellicoe. I want to make sure we have about 15 minutes left, but I
Yeah.
want to make sure we answer all the questions in the feed. The next question we have is from Danny. Where will the funding for updating the high school come from?
Dan, you want to address that one?
Whenever we take on a project that's considered major maintenance, it's a separate budget that comes from the state. It's legislatively driven. There is a formula for it, and that was the funds that I was talking about earlier that it self-adjusts based on ADM. It's called major maintenance money. It's in state statute. That money is given to every district based on a computation that they have per district, and it can only be used for repair and replacement of components in a building. It cannot be used for wages. It can't be used for educational purposes. It can only go to what they consider major maintenance projects. It doesn't go to even daily PMs or monthly PMs. So my maintenance staff, when they go out there and they change filters, that's on the school district's dime. But when we come across a pump that exceeds $1,000, I get to put in for a major maintenance request, and I draw on that funds, and that's how we do all of our major repairs. I'm not allowed to do what they consider demolitions on it, but I can go in and I can renovate by upgrading lights. I can upgrade sound systems. I can change carpet out in facilities, things that are actually graded. There's 26 components to a building, and if it's included in that component list, those are items that I can either repair or replace under state statute with funds that are separate from anything else that the district gets in the block grant.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question, we have a couple from Elizabeth. Do the tax dollars spent at Smith's go to our children's education? And she also said, what about letters from kids themselves? I think that would be helpful.
The sales tax currently just goes to the general fund for the state of Wyoming. There is a proposal out there for a penny tax that would be dedicated to education. So to clarify those two things, currently it goes to the state coffers, but the proposed legislation would be dedicated to education. And absolutely, students writing to legislators, I can't think of a more impactful way to let legislators know the impacts that they personally would be facing. What a wonderful idea.
Yes, for sure. Our next question is from Mountain States Pressure Service. You keep mentioning that some legislators will not meet with you. Can you tell us who? If they won't meet with you, we need to know so we can push on them.
I answered that.
I want to make sure that we address everything out loud for
Oh,
folks who can't
okay.
watch the chat, Nicole.
I just said thank you for your question. To answer this sensitively, I wanted to just address who has met with us to ask questions. And these are the only individuals the school district has had any opportunity to interact with despite invitations. Thank you, Mr. Chad Banks. Thank you, Mr. Clark Stith. And thank you, Scott Heiner.
We also had, when the invitation was sent out, Senator Baldwin was unable to meet the night that we did meet, but he did respond.
That is true. Thank you, Chair Jellicoe, for clarifying that.
So if we did not mention their names, we have not spoken to them.
And
They have not spoken to us.
Nope.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Jackman?
Mr. Kolb did call me, I think it was Saturday, and chatted with me for about an hour. But I tried to reference him to the school district as much as possible, since my knowledge can sometimes be limited on a lot of those.
Thank you for the information.
Yeah.
Do we have more questions?
We've answered all of our questions so far.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes remaining. Mr. Celeroli? Dan, go,
Madam
please.
Chair, just because I pay attention as you do with all of the bills, one of the things that I find interesting is, one, most of us in this area of the state get Salt Lake news. I don't have TV. I use internet news, so I get Cheyenne news. And the other day I heard, everybody worries about taxes and nobody wants to be taxed. And trying to, narrow down how do we benefit education. I heard them talking about fuel tax. So I went in and did some looking, and House Bill 26 is a fuel tax. That's something that affects everybody in Wyoming and doesn't necessarily affect the trucks coming across Wyoming. They can fill up in Utah, Idaho, in Nebraska, and drive straight across Wyoming without ever spending money. I don't know very many people who are residents here in Wyoming who don't travel at least 100 miles a week. So when we're cognizant about how taxes are applied in the case of education, nobody wants, you hear a lot of talk about nobody wants to increase sales tax, property tax or whatever, to what it takes. And yet everyone will be paying more money at the fuel pumps. And I think very few people are aware of it. And I think the folks that are out there in our communities need to know that, get with your legislators, not just about one topic, but do some research. It does take a little bit of time to do some research and be informed as to what's going on out there.
Well, and I would suggest, look at the truck stops. There's no lack of trucks in our truck stops. And that goes to speak to the less expensive fuel that they can get here than they can in Utah. I travel to Utah. I have family there. So I look at the truck stops here. They are definitely stopping for fuel.
Yep, that'll change.
Still no other questions?
No.
Anyone that would like to make some final comments?
I'm trying to think of any questions that came on Tuesday that maybe we didn't
haven't
address.
I
I
actually
think,
have those all written down over here.
I know some of that information was really helpful, but
I think we had several ask what can we as the public do, but I think we've done a very nice job of addressing that this morning.
Can I address another House bill?
Sure.
Sure, Dan.
Okay. House Bill 0005. Okay, in that House bill, I've been really following it. About 2 years ago, the Speaker of the House,
Harshman?
Harshman, he fought for and passed and got passed a House statute that we could use major maintenance money, 10% of our major maintenance for security and safety in our buildings. It passed, and every district that I know of took their money that they were allotted and went in and beefed up their security systems and took care of life safety issues, things like that. This new House proposal puts a 2-year moratorium on any maintenance or any inclusion. So we can no longer, if this passes and it's effective immediately, no longer use that 10% other than what we currently have in our budget. But we can no longer use any future 10%, at least for the next 2 years, towards security and safety in our buildings. So that means if you have a fire system that you want to put into your building, if you didn't have it put away, you cannot use any of your 10% to put some in your building. If you have a security issue, like we have some security vestibules that would need to be constructed, I have put away enough money to probably do 1 or 2, but certainly not all of them, because who anticipated something like this happening. So a moratorium on spending an additional 10% on safety and security, I think is absolutely ridiculous, especially when it was legislators that encouraged people to go out and do security, access controls, things like that. So there's a lot of districts now that are currently have done all this, and now you can't even use your major maintenance money to replace, repair of those same parts.
Thank you for the update.
Amy has a question. Do you know when the next update will be with any further information? And boy, it's rolling this month. So as soon as we get information, the school board and the administration and the district as a whole will continue to keep updating everybody to keep you as up to date as possible.
they're in session now.
Yep.
And it changes every day. I mean, when at the meeting Tuesday night, we actually were somewhat optimistic about some things, and between then and now,
Yeah.
most of those things have been shot down. So, we're back to, oh dear, where are we going to get the money for the cuts again? So it changes on a daily basis. And I would suggest to people out there that, once you know who your senator is and who your House representative is, follow their votes. And if they're not voting to encourage your values, what you want to see done, let them know. Let them know. And I know we've just gotten through an election, but there will be another election in about 18 months. Remember those things so that they are, they're voting the way you expect them to vote, because those are your values. And if they're not, then look for people that do profess your values.
Can I just want to say thank you? I think that Ms. Palacios said it very well when she testified. She said, Wyoming was one of the states that all the teachers came back, all the principals came back, the kids came back, and our teachers weren't on Capitol Hill asking the representatives to sign their death or their wills or whatever. I mean, we did it and we fought and we've stayed open. And it's not just our educators, our custodians, our it doesn't matter who it is. Everybody puts in a lot of time. And I think that one thing that you could do is thank them. Sometimes I feel like it's a thankless job, and thank them. This has been a really rough year, and they have powered through and they have fought, and they have continued to teach your kids to the highest level. So tell them thank you. It's not just one position that puts in these long hours. I think Max said it best. All of our positions are putting in long hours to do what's best for our kids. So thank you, educators. I know you're very stressed, and we'll do what we can to lessen that, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We have a couple more important questions, I think, Kelly, that came in that I'd like to address before we go. Is it important that we use email, or is there time for paper mail letters? And then hearing about these bills are things parents need to hear. Is there a common place these come up that might be easily accessed for parents?
Good idea.
Email is the most efficient because things change so quickly, and email is almost instantaneous, whereas snail mail, especially where it goes to Salt Lake and then it goes to Cheyenne and stuff, that can be almost 2 weeks now. And so things move so quickly that the email is actually the best way to do it. Second question was,
where can parents go and see the bills that are going through, or keep updated on information that's going through the legislature?
again, go to that Wyoming legislature website, and it will tell you what they're talking about. You can look up the actual bills and look at them, and then you can see if they're in committee, the status of them, if they've been passed by a committee and they're waiting for hearing on the floor. You can follow the status of any of the bills there, and Zach has put that up so that you can see how to follow that. So that's just, again, google.org, I think it is.
Can we put it on our website, or is it there?
.gov.
We can definitely add it to our website. I'll
And
add it
maybe
to our-
highlight those bills that are directly affecting
We
education.
could probably make it easier for people yet. So the other thing that the Medicaid bill has come forward. This is a bill that has been brought up. It's been 5 or 6 years that they've brought this Medicaid bill forward and voted it down every time. And what the Medicaid bill does is accesses federal funding to help pay for Medicaid, which relates to not only many times elderly or disabled people, but it also helps students, it helps kids. So that is coming forward again. And frankly, if they're bringing that forward again, they really have, maybe they are starting to look at some funding sources because they shut that down for years. But that is another one that, that could help families with healthcare for their children. So please take a look at that one and suggest that maybe they take a look at passing that, because that's federal funds that we're missing out on, and we have missed out on for years.
Chair Jellicoe.
Superintendent McGovern.
I know we're right at the end of time. I was just looking through the chat and I noticed that there were some comments and then a question from Pam. And just in closing, she had a question about our graduation rates. And I want to make sure that we address that. You know, I think graduation rates, there's always room for improvement. And so I understand where Pam is coming from on there. It is disheartening to take a look at where our grad rates are right now, and we want to increase those, and we always work at those. I don't think there's a single teacher out there or staff member that doesn't want those higher. But one thing that I would ask is in order to turn those graduation rates around, I would put our staff next to any other teacher. That is how proud of them that I believe in their skill set and the work that they do. And I believe in our kids, but it also takes the community to raise that graduation rate. So while I understand, Pam, where you're coming from and others, I encourage you to be involved in helping to turn that around. We're always looking for parents to join committees, leadership committees. So I invite you and others. I would like to see those higher. Absolutely. And I know every building and principal and staff member would like to see those higher too. So I encourage you to be an advocate and please join, because we're always looking for parents to be a part of that solution. We understand what the problem is. Help us be part of that solution as well. And then one other final thought before we turn that over to you. We've talked a lot this morning about what the different bills could do, the reality of the district. And I think it's important to say how important it was for all of us to be open with our community and let people know this is what we're facing. This is what your children are facing, what you are facing for that. And when the legislature ends on there, and if a school closed, guys, that's not the time to worry about those issues. The time is now. And if a school has to close, it's going to be too late for us. We're going to be repairing what that damage has been. So I encourage you to take part in that and help us. Let them hear your voice, because really the time is now.
Thank you. And I too, on behalf of the board, would like to thank everyone that's on with us today. Thank you. The questions were wonderful. It's been a very hopefully a very informative conversation. And I think we've answered all the questions. So that was important to us to be able to do that. So thank you so much for joining us today. Spread the word. These sessions have been recorded so people can take a look at them at their convenience. And please, if there are further questions, they can go to the website and submit questions or contact the district in various ways to ask those questions, and we will get back to them as soon as possible. So thank you again. We appreciate all your efforts, and until we do this again. Thank you.